This episode will leave you with some provoking questions because we still don't fully understand how some AI models make decisions. Even AI developers admit that some deep learning models act like black boxes, meaning we don't know exactly how they arrive at their conclusions. AI learns from everything you do online, from what you search to what you watch on YouTube, including this conversation. Welcome to PhD with Woman on It, Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hack delivered will be by our guest, Roya Kandalan. Topic: AI dangers and opportunities, understanding the real-world impact. Episode 171 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my mojo, and empathy is critical when you are working on artificial intelligence. AI dangers and opportunities. AI is changing everything, your job, your future, and the way we live. But with that change comes risk, deepfakes, bias, the jobs that could disappear overnight. In this episode 171, we sit down with Roya Kandalan, a research scientist with a PhD in electrical engineering, who's on a mission to make sure no one gets left behind in the AI revolution. Roya has spent years at the cutting edge of AI, developing solutions for cancer treatment and insurance, and she's here to break down the reality of AI, the good, the bad, and the terrifying. So, Roya, where are you joining this recording from?
Good morning. I'm joining from Boston, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Thank you, Roya. You also a Woman Tech Makers ambassador. That's how we met. Hello, fellow woman tech makers. So let's start with the good of AI. What do you believe is the groundbreaking changes that AI is bringing to us?
Absolutely. I always love to start with a good note. I think with AI, a lot of the limitation are being lifted. And with that, I mean limitation for the medical care and also education are the top of the list for me. We know that medical services are a little bit limited because of, obviously, we don't have enough of a staff and professionals to care for everybody. And that is both within the US and also outside of the US in the global world. AI enables us to reach people whose access to anything medical would be limited. I give you an instance. For example, in some of the developing countries, access to a professional to read ultrasonic for pregnancy is very limited, and they don't have the access, and it causes dangers for the mother, for the parent, and for the child. So with AI, we can essentially lift that and enable people with less education or less expertise to be able to read the ultrasonic. That's when we are dealing with the medicine. The other aspect of it that really excites me is education. Historically, education has been expensive. In the US, it is expensive to go to a good college and get a degree, and outside of the US, we still have countries in which education is not available to everybody. Certainly, we see that women are being barred from going to higher studies. With AI, we can tailor tutors and educator for each child or each student essentially, and teach them what they want to learn in a method that makes it really understandable to them. And by that, I want to be really clear that it is not gonna essentially remove the jobs of doctors or teachers. We as human, we still need that empathy. We need that touch. We need that conversation with somebody who understands us, and it's not a machine. But a lot of the tasks would be modified. So those people who do these jobs would have time to do what they love and enjoy rather than doing some of the more mundane tasks. So these are the two things that I think would be the toughest of AI impact. Let me add one more thing before. I wanted to mention that with AI, we are able to traverse a larger capacity of work in a shorter time. So in scientific, essentially studies, it would be really impactful, because now instead of having a scientist essentially exploring, we can have multiple AI agents exploring way more paths. So if you are following the news of AI, you might heard of AlphaFold 3, which basically did 800 years worth of research in some calculation within obviously a very shorter time, which doesn't immediately hit the news, but it enables us to find medicine and proteins to help people who are dealing with sickness way faster. So I think AI would be extremely beneficial to us.
To those people who are afraid of losing jobs, what would be your advice on how to mitigate the danger?
Absolutely. I think history repeats itself, and this is not the first time that we are building a technology, or our world is transitioning with a technology that would essentially replace some of the skill set that we already had, right? We had the Industrial Revolution before, and that was where the strength of the human was replaced with this machine. But did everybody go out of job? No. People learn how to use their different skills, or their skills differently. For example, when we moved from people who would essentially ride carriages to people who drive cars, the same people learn how to drive cars. It takes them some work, it takes them some energy, but they learn how to adapt to it. Same goes when we went from telegraphs, which required somebody to actually read them, to telephones, and right now we have all the smartphones. So these type of changes in the technology enables us to move further and learn something new and apply that to still hold our jobs. If you are, and I think that's really brutal and blunt to say, but if you are so rigid and you are like, okay, I got my degree and I should be good, I'm sorry, but your job would be replaced. But if you are able and if you are willing, that's the right word, if you are willing to adapt and learn, and you have the mindset of continuous learning, I'm more than certain that your job would be better, because now you can utilize all of these tools and technologies to make your day-to-day better and to make yourself productive. And I'm certain, because AI is only good as repetitive tasks, it actually gonna to remove the pieces of your job that was mundane and boring for you. So in my day-to-day, a part of my job is, for example, to fill out paperwork on what I have done. It is not something I enjoy. AI would do it way better than me. So I can spend the time in solving some more creative problems, which makes me so happy.
Fantastic. We are all happy to see competition. However, we know that the recent release of DeepSeek disrupted Silicon Valley with the release of cheaply developed AI models that compete with flagship offering from OpenAI. So have you tested DeepSeek? Have you seen the mistakes that are circulating online?
Yes, obviously. I think I read the paper a little bit after it got released, maybe a day or two after it got released. And I liked the work that they did, and I liked the way that they trained the model. So historically, or at least in the short history of this deep learning model, we are heavily depending on human feedback to retrain these models. But DeepSeek, I think, took a leap of chance and they started to removing that human dependency. So essentially making these supervised data for fine tuning more synthetic. And that's one. And I just actually posted on my LinkedIn. It seems the way that they enable their GPUs to work very well was by designing CUDA algorithms. CUDA is essentially for parallel processing for NVIDIA chips. They made an algorithm that made communication between the memory and process really fast, which is not something new. I know a lot of US companies right now are working on that, and a lot of the other chips that you see that are not GPUs, they actually work on this problem, how to make processing faster by making the best connection between the memory and the processing unit on these essentially chips. So I think from a scientific perspective, it's very interesting. And the way they handled the problem lifted a lot of essentially barriers for the startups and smaller companies who doesn't have billions of dollars to spend. Something that was interesting also was Anthropic mentioned that they did not also spend millions on their models. They said it's within a tens of millions rather than billions, which is our expectation when we are talking about models from Meta or models from, let's say, OpenAI. So I would say that cheap model wasn't really new because Anthropic didn't quote a number, but they mentioned that their number was also lower. And two, the way that they explained how they train this model and fine-tune it opens door for many more startups here in US and all around the world. And two, you ask a question about what is about this model and the type of answers that they do. And that is, I think, requires more attention because now we have a model that was trained in a different region of the world with different perspective, with different languages, with different ideas. And obviously, similar to the guardrails that we have in the US, they put their own guardrails and how it would maybe ban the circulation of information. That is the problem. So I appreciate DeepSeek from a scientific perspective. And I recognize that no matter where in the world we are, we put guardrails based on our beliefs. But I wish for a world that we could freely talk about information, no matter how hurtful they are to our history. But we are open to say that, yes, history holds this against us, and we learn from that. And that goes for both United States, for China, and any other country that is essentially building an artificial intelligence model.
One of the threats that have been raised is, especially after TikTok ban, when there was traces of a lot of data and a lot of information being held by Chinese emporium. I wonder if that could raise concern to those startups who will build model based on DeepSeek.
So to be clear, you are worried about the circulation of the data?
I'm worried about the data being stolen because recently their OpenAI claimed that DeepSeek stole API. So I think there is the bigger concern of how ethical DeepSeek is.
I would say when you are entering ethical and responsible AI best practices, I agree that I do not want to give my data to a company that I do not trust, and it does not just. I don't want to name any specific company. In general, I'm really rigorous in knowing what and how my data gonna be used. But also, I want you to be cognizant that your data is out there, and currently we do not have any specific laws or regulation that give you the ownership of your data. So you mentioned TikTok, and obviously TikTok holds information, for example, about a person's biometric. You are uploading all of these videos. But unfortunately, at least in the US, if you are, and don't quote me on that, I read about this, but I'm not a legal person, so I might be mistaken. But as far as I know, if you are in public and somebody records you, you don't hold essentially copyright of that recording, and you don't have any essentially right about that. But with that video, somebody can go and utilize your biometric, and if they put enough of time in it, they can essentially build somebody close to you. Not to clone you, but for example, to clone your voice or something in that range. I don't want to scare everybody else, but for example, cloning the voice is really easy. I have a lot of videos online. Somebody can easily go and clone my voice and call my family and say anything that they want to say. So when you go to data, ethical and responsible data, it's on you to read and make sure who has your data, but also your data is everywhere, and it's very hard to hold the ownership of the data. About stealing somebody's API and utilizing some other model to build your data and build synthetic data, I don't want to put the name of a stealing on it. I think science you always wanted to stand on the shoulder of giants. And if some company utilizes some other company network to synthesize data, I don't think it's wrong. I think they should be up and open about it, and they should have been the group who actually declares it, rather than the original company come out and say, hey, we think that they did this. That makes it responsible and ethical.
I think, after all, the consumer wins here, because the more competition, the better it is, and we need more open AI and more progress in that field. So you've worked, let's move into the positive outcomes. We've worked on AI for cancer treatment. Have you ever had a moment where you thought this could actually save lives, or this could go very wrong?
This could save lives for sure. So one of the projects that I worked on, and I'm really proud of, is a work I did for UT Southwestern Cancer Research. And so I think at the beginning I mentioned that medicine is expensive. In general, any type of medical services could be very expensive, and a lot of it is because medical staff and professionals are limited, even in the US. So when somebody, God forbid, get diagnosed with cancer and they go to a hospital, the time that it takes for the medical staff to build their treatment plan is more than a few days. We are talking about more than 10 days. That's precious time that we can utilize for these people to receive the treatment faster. And in this center, we built models to essentially utilize AI to build a benchmark for the medical staff to start, rather than starting from scratch. So significantly accelerating the time it takes for the medical staff to build a treatment plan. However, it was really center specific. So we would do it based on the demographic and the anatomy of the people who were visiting, for example, that specific center at the time. The work that I did, and it was very before what we do right now as fine-tuning, we are talking 2017, 2018. I built this model that would hold, or you could have essentially fine-tuning with today's jargon, with few shots, so less than 10 new data points, to fit into any other style or any other demographic. And we tested it with essentially a different school in the Europe. They send us their data, and with fine tuning, with I think less than 10 patients' data, we were able to fit this model to work with that demographic. And what this is important because essentially we can expand this model to work with satellite and different centers that are very far from professional staff. So making cancer treatment very fast and accessible for everybody, no matter where they are or how far they are from a center with highly highly educated expert. So that was a thing I did, which I don't want to be arrogant, but I'm proud of.
You should be proud of. Are there any other projects that you're super excited about the progress that's been made in terms of healthcare?
I'm seeing a lot of work still in cancer, and something that is very interesting that right now is happening is, let me go one step back. So when you are handling cancer treatment, a part of it is to identify the cancer cell and different organs within the CT. And historically, somebody has to sit down and contour these organs essentially for any treatment to happen. Because when you are when the patient receives radiation, there are a lot of mathematics behind how to optimize this radiation so the tumor cell would receive the maximum radiation and the organs around that tumor cell would not receive any radiation or the minimum possible radiation. But to do that, you need to know exactly where these essentially organs actually located, and somebody had to sit down and do that. When I was working on this problem, we would use very predictive deep learning model, essentially predictive centered deep learning models to identify where each essentially organ is located. But right now, with large language model who are essentially they can input images to them, you can take this way further, and they are more, I would say, cognizant of these organs. So they are not just looking into the cell and their intensity and the pixel color. They actually can hold information about this is a body and this is an organ, and we are, for example, let's say looking for the femoral head, so it should be in this region. It takes I think the science way further, because now you can actually trust those output, because there is a cognizant of this is a body, this is how it lays out, and then this piece should be, for example, the femoral head. I'm really interested in segmentations that is happening in cancer treatment utilizing these large language models.
That's fascinating, because not only we can deep dive into a lot of data, but also we can eliminate human fatigue and human error, which is very, especially doctors who are working under harsh conditions, sometimes overnight. That's definitely one of the things that is promising. And now let's go into deep fakes, bias, misinformation. There's a lot of that. Are we already too late to control AI's dark side?
I wouldn't say we are too late, but we need, I don't think it's on AI to work that. I think it's on the society, and it's on us to educate those around us. There was a time that if you wanted to learn something, you would have Googled it, and you had to read a few blog posts, and you needed your essentially critical judgment to figure out which piece is real and which piece is just somebody written something with no backing. And as a scientist, I learned to always look for citation and make sure that the piece that I'm reading is backed by a prestigious, essentially, institution. But right now, with large language models, let's say ChatGPT or any other chatbot that is available out there, we are getting used to putting the question and asking for information and taking those information as fact, which is the most, I would say, wrong thing to do, because these models are not trained to be factual. These models are fancy autocomplete. They know based on the statistics of how they've seen the word and how much data they have, they've been exposed to, they can guess what is the right next word, but they are not factual. So we need to tell everybody that, okay, use ChatGPT, use Gemini, but double check what this information is talking about and make sure that it's coming from essentially the right source. That's one. You mentioned bias, and that's a topic near and dear to my heart. For one, I'm a woman in tech, and if you ask for a scientist in tech, for any of these chatbots, they would utilize a male pronoun rather than a she or her. And it's not because of these models. I want to also be clear that these models are not evil. They are not against us. We historically have more data that shows more men scientists than women scientists. And it is not because women are not smart enough. It's simply because historically we didn't let women to go to school. We didn't let women to have a career and to grow. It's very recent that women in the United States can go to school and have a career on their own. Right now in the world, outside of the United States, we still have countries that ban women from going to a school or having a career. So these models are learning from all of this historic data. And when they respond to us, they will actually show what we taught them with no filter, right? So if we have always talked about all of the male scientists, I cannot expect this model to know a female can be a scientist. It means inherently these models are biased. So again, don't take what they say as a fact. And lastly, you mentioned about deepfake. And I think when I was explaining a couple of earlier questions, I mentioned that you can easily clone somebody's voice right now. It is not available to public, but that type of model can be built. And that goes for other type of biometrics. So for example, for facial expression and as such. So it requires us to be really cognizant of if we see a video or if we hear a recording, to make sure that this comes from a valid source, to actually believe that. And there is a game that the social media plays with us, and I don't want to say it's on purpose, but it essentially boosts the interaction of people with these social media, and that's by feeding people the type of content that they want to hear about them. For a very harmless example, think about Netflix. Netflix or any other streaming platform that you are utilizing looks into a few of the shows or I don't know, movies that you enjoy and you watch until the end, or you give a thumbs up to, and it gives you recommendation based on those. The same goes with social media, and they recommend you the type of content that you want to watch. On top of deepfake and how easily a piece of news can be manipulated and turned to something that it was not initially be, now we can feed people a specific news to alter how they are thinking. So I would suggest to read more and to be more cognizant of what you are seeing is not the whole reality, and it might be a little bit more to that story.
Oh, absolutely. I think opening your mind to different people's views and being mindful of there might be a different media outputs, not just reliant on one media output, which might be biased, as we have seen in, for example, recent election in the US. But let's not go into politics. You are a woman in AI, a field that is still dominated by men. What's one moment that made you realize how much harder it is to break in?
Let me tell you how I got into the AI, and I get to your story, to the question that you asked. So I think you mentioned that my PhD is in electrical engineering. And when I started looking into the AI, it was the very early days of AI. And people so I started in 2015, 2016. And I would say the bloom of AI started in 2012 with AlexNet, which essentially introduced deep learning back into the conversation. But to do my PhD on AI, what I did was I talked with my PhD advisor, and he is the most amazing person. And his lab was not working on AI at the time. As far as I know, they are not still working on AI. The lab was to work on UAVs, on the drones, essentially, and how they interact with each other. And given that my background is in electrical engineering, my math and my linear algebra is quite good. So the deal was, if I can solve a mathematical issue on how these UAVs communicate with each other, I can freely decide what I want to do for the rest of my PhDs. And I was able to solve that mathematical problem and publish a journal paper based on that. And that was basically the green light that I needed to spend the rest of my PhD years building a navigation assistive technology for visually impaired. And it required me to build a variety of different AI models for anything like figuring out where the person is located, making sure that they are not endangered by any obstacle, and how to communicate with a person through speech recognition. I built my way to AI by sitting down in the office in my lab at the university and reading and playing. And essentially, I didn't have anybody to talk to who knew how to work in the world of AI, simply because it was very new and a few labs in very good universities were working on those, and it was not still prevalent everywhere. It was harder. It's hard to be alone and work on something that other people might not believe that it would be the next big thing. And to this day, it's hard to explain that as what you would do as an AI scientist. I would say the job definition as a woman is a little bit. I don't want to say that this is not a welcome essentially career for women, because I want more women to be working on this. But this is historically been a male dominant essentially field, and you need to have a voice, and you need to be assertive, and you need to be on top of your game to be able to grow in this field. So it adds a little bit more challenges.
What do you mean by on top of your game?
One mistake can be bigger than essentially it can be for somebody else. So at least for me, I always have to know what is happening. So I read the DeepSeek paper. Few hours after it got published, I saw it coming through Twitter, and I quickly read through this. I posted about this, I think, before anybody in my circle. simply because I feel that pressure that I need to know. If I don't know, then I would look stupid and everybody would think that I'm not good enough. And I don't want to impose that like as a universal problem. I have imposter syndrome. I never think I'm enough. I always think the worst of myself. So please don't think that you have to exactly do that. It's just me. I go a little bit crazy with like feeling I'm not enough. So that was a little bit of being vulnerable about this.
Well, I think you will benefit from next week's episode. We will talk about how to tackle the challenge of imposter syndrome. But before we conclude, what's one job that people think is safe from AI but actually isn't?
Oh, that's a scary question to ask. One job that is safe from AI? I wouldn't think there is any job that wouldn't be altered. Every job would be altered. But one thing that I would bet on it would never be changed is the human connections that we have. So I would never want, for example, my therapist to be an AI. No matter how good the AI is, I want them to be a human and I want them to have the experience of the human. And in theory, you can train an AI to have those type of essentially background and that history, but it doesn't make me feel they are human, and we need those type of feeling. So any type of job that counts on human interactions, I would say they would be later, they would be impacted at the last. And it's not just, I mentioned a therapist, it's not just a therapist. For example, if you go for a hair appointment, a part of it is the hair appointment and a robot can do. But another piece of it is that connection you have with that person who does the haircut. Those cannot be replaced. We need the person to talk with us. Somebody gave me an example. She is a very well-known AI scientist. She was diagnosed with cancer, and obviously she knew there would be AI involved with building the treatment plan and essentially like how she would receive the treatment. So a lot of that involves AI. But she wanted to get the last thumbs up that she's cancer-free from a human surgeon. And she mentioned that no matter how good the AI is, I want a human who has feeling come to me and say, hey, you're good, cancer is gone. I think we need that human. We need the communication. We need somebody to care for us.
It's interesting what you're saying, because psychologists are also being replaced by some AI products, including like first responders, and that's what they are talking about as a first aid, immediate response. Would you say it's a good development, or would you rather focus on helping psychologists to develop treatment?
It's interesting that you are asking if it's a good thing to do or not, regardless if it can be done. And I really appreciate our question. Regardless anything that we do, I think any scientist, any engineer out there should ask themselves this question. Is it a good thing to have, no matter if you can do it or not? Please do ask that question always. But back to your question, I think the reason that we are going down the path of having AI be the first responder and be the first to come and answer a problem, it's simply because we don't have enough therapists. I personally had to wait for so long to find a therapist here in Massachusetts, and I know it is not easy in the other states, and obviously, or at least I assume in the rest of the world, the problem should might be the same. So we had to build something to be the first responder for somebody who doesn't have immediate access to a therapist and they go through a tough time. So the next best thing could be AI. If we could utilize AI to train more therapists, more human therapists, I wouldn't see the need, and I wouldn't see why somebody would have wanted to go and talk with an AI, no matter how good the AI is, rather than talking with a person. So the problem is not if we are building it, if it's a good thing to build it or not. It's simply because we don't have enough professionals to care for all of the people who go through mental health essentially problems.
So you talked about the personal data, which is training AI models. Would you advise what to do to make sure that our data is not just out there in the public, or would you just advise just put whatever you want, like on Facebook, because your data is going to be buried across too many people?
I'm an optimistic scientist in general, but for this specific thing, I'm more towards, no, don't put everything on any sort of social media. Or if you do so, be cognizant and let people around you to know that this is what you are doing, because a lot of your behavior could be harvested from those data, and that would put everybody, I don't want to say everybody in danger, but you are simply giving so much information about your being to people that you do not know if it is available in public. This is about the data that you willingly are putting on internet. I have a lot of recording on YouTube, so I know what are the risks. And I, for example, have essentially like secret words that if somebody call you and they didn't say this is not me, so don't give them money, even if they say like they crashed their car in the middle of nowhere, right? Or things in that regard. But a lot of the data that we leave out there is not the data that we know we actually leave out there, right? So a lot of data, for example, from your interaction with your phone, the type of application that you are utilizing, the places that you go, the services that you are utilizing, they also tell a lot about a person. So I would push more. I want people to be educated about this, but I also want people to push for regulation around this. If my data is being utilized to train an AI, to know, for example, if this person utilizes this application, they might be interested in this other application. I want to know first, and I want to gain from it, not just having my data out there for free. Somebody said if there is an app for free, you are essentially the provider of the data, and I 100% agree with that. So know where and how you are providing your data to the world. Back to the DeepSeek, I haven't read the policy myself, but somebody posted it somewhere, and that somebody I trust, that DeepSeek actually holds information about the interaction with the system. To me, it's a red flag. I use it because I have to know about all of the AI platforms out there. But if you are asking, for example, DeepSeek question, and if that is a part of their policy, be sure what type of information you are giving these models. And it is not going to be lost. So the idea that there are 8 billion people out there, who am I? It somebody just needs to have the motive to go and dig deep and figure out the data. And always imagine, if you are the next president of the United States, do you want this data to be out there and somebody come and dig it? So that's where I am with this.
AI is already making decisions about your life without you realizing it, because loan approval, hiring process, medical diagnosis, AI is in control of more than you think. So use your data and your input, even if it's YouTube, if you're searching, this is something that you have to be mindful of. So I think it's a nice segue to the question of what are the top 3 soft skills all career-driven females, in your opinion, should have, especially those who are looking into becoming women tech makers, ambassadors?
Absolutely. That's one of the best questions. I love it. Because I mentioned that we need to be on top of our game, and that means that to always know everything and to read a lot and to be very technical and be hands-on experiment. But it leaves out, so that's like you being good in what you do, which is every woman, right? But communicating that to the rest of the team and to people who are not technical, it's a very required skill set that we don't actually learn through a school, and we don't this is not a muscle that we work on, let's put it that way. So I highly recommend that if you are working in this industry, please make sure that you know how to make that idea of yours, which is very brilliant, to something that everybody would understand. And start with, if you have a child, explain it to your child. If not, explain it to somebody who is very far from that technology and they don't have any background in it. The way you explain it should be understandable for them. The second thing is, don't be afraid of networking events. This is a harsh truth, in my opinion, that being brilliant takes you just to somewhere, but it is not exactly where you want to go. The rest of it is how you are interacting with people and what is other people's opinion and perception about you. So my personal experience been that, okay, always skip the lunch, always sit down, always use that time for reading more and learning more, and that's how you go further. But the reality is, or at least my reality was, if I spend that coffee break and I learn about somebody else and how they do their job, besides that it technically can be helpful and I learn some other perspective, that person can advocate for me later in my career. And those type of advocates have been always so invaluable to me. And lastly, what I suggest is, and I wasn't born in here. I moved to the US when I was 24. So a lot of it might be my background and the society that I was raised in. But I learned to be quiet and to smile and always to be agreeable to everybody else. So never like ruffle any feathers. Be confident because you know so much. I mentioned that I am dealing with imposter syndrome. I never think I'm enough. But even if you know that you are not enough, so you for a fact, you know this is not your expertise, be confident and speak your mind. The worst thing that can happen is that it's a mistake and somebody teaches you what is the right way to do things. But be graceful with yourself if you are making mistakes, because those mistakes don't define you. They just show you where are the sharp edges that you have, and you can refine them for later on. So these are my 3 points: networking, communication, and confidence.
Beautiful. And as Racy brought to our attention this quote, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You lean in, you trip, you fall, you learn. That's okay. With each step forward, you learn. The ups and downs are the majority of the journey, as Sol Rashidi said. Now, Roya, it's very inspiring. So you talk about learning. And speaking of learning, what book would you recommend for anybody, because this was a groundbreaking book for you?
I very recently, maybe last year, read The Word I See by Fei Fei Li. And I think she's a role model for me since the early days that I started my work in AI. She was the person that thought, okay, I will bet all of my tenure money on building this data set, ImageNet data set, and this is going to be a breakthrough. And nobody believed in her because the cost for making that data set was huge. And she still did it. And it was groundbreaking. And it was the reason that we know AI the way we know it today. So I think I owe my career to her. I look up to her all the time. And she was an immigrant, and she explains about everything that she went through and all of those hard decisions that she had to make, whether to choose this path or stick with what she has. All of those dilemmas, I resonate with her a lot, and I enjoyed that very, very much. I want to also mention one more book, because we talked about data, and I think for everybody who is concerned about data, they need to read this book. It's called Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari. It's interestingly explains how your data can be utilized and how AI can make better decisions than us in some cases. I strongly recommend your audience to read that book too.
You mentioned role models, and here is another role model, Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, "Women are like tea bags. We never know our true strength until we are in hot water." So in life, how are you in hot water? How are you brewing?
I think I never I never allowed myself to stay in my comfort zone for so long. So first and foremost, I think leaving my country and my family behind and coming to a different culture and country was a huge change. And when somebody asked me what was the biggest obstacle that you were able to overcome, I did so much after that point. I grew my career. I built who I am today. But I think that decision of my early 20s to leave everything behind and come to a different country on my own maybe was the hardest thing to do, because I was just like 23, 24 years old. Today, I haven't seen my family for over 10 years, which is the cost of that decision. But I think that was still the right decision to make.
Where are you coming from?
I'm originally from Iran.
And you can't really travel to Iran right now?
No. So traveling and having them come over is a little bit challenging. So I think I'm missing them, and it's tough, but it's a part of the decision that I made. And I gained a lot from this decision, so I need to also deal with the consequences. But on top of that, so I mentioned that is the hardest one for me. And since then, I think there is nothing that I cannot do. So shout out to everybody who makes such decision. I think breaking into AI, I explained it to you, it was also something that I'm proud of, because it took a lot of work for me. I didn't have immediately an instructor to tell me what is the path. So I found my path by bumping my head against the walls many, many, many times and learning things on my own. So Fei Fei Li had this class at Stanford, and she released the lectures in YouTube, And I would go to work to my school at like 6 a.m. and read the lectures and go through the lectures. And there was no ChatGPT, nothing. So for every code that I didn't know, I had to Google and go through a Stack Overflow to figure out what that code actually does, to the point that I got hired as an AI scientist after my graduation. So I never had to write a line of deep learning code through my studies, but I did so much of that because I wanted to, and I would have spent the time. And then all of these, you mentioned that I'm a woman tech maker. All of these is because, and they just force me now to go further and always be open that this is where I'm coming from. So if you are a woman in somewhere in the world that you don't feel appreciated, please push further. You can get there, and don't worry, like, it's gonna be all right. You got this.
You got this. You got the network of women tech makers, and you can reach out to Roya if you wish, because she's there to help other women succeed. Now, as we always ask this question, if you could have a private breakfast anywhere in the world with any person in the world, who would you choose and where would you go to?
I think I would love to have a breakfast with Fei Li, but there is somebody who is not alive anymore, and I would certainly want to have a breakfast with. My mom, when I was a child, she would turn the biography of the scientist as the stories for me, and like I would go to sleep with these stories. And my favorite one was Maria Curie, because she had to leave her country. She struggled a lot and she sacrificed a lot to become a scientist. And she was so resilient and just like go, that she's the only person who had 2 Nobel Prize in 2 disciplines. I really wanted, I would cherish this opportunity to sit down with her, chat with her, and learn about her stories from her views. I know she doesn't, obviously she doesn't live anymore, but that would have been the person that I wanted really, really to know as a person.
There you go, a person from Poland, just like me, living abroad, just like Roya and me. Now, let's go into question of your life lesson quote and how did it change you?
I think I was thinking where I read it or heard it. I think I actually saw it in a movie. It's to start, it's that you're as strong as you want and you're as weak as you think. And that exactly is the reason that there is no boundaries. It's just what we think there is. And if we turn our mindset that, okay, I can do this no matter what, and I will do this, you will actually do that. So don't limit yourself, but what you think can go wrong, or what the society might think of you, or why you wouldn't be able to do this. I think I can do it. I have done so much before, and I can handle this new one. And even if it doesn't work, it's okay. It's something that I learned from.
If everything was perfect, you would never learn and you would never grow, as Beyonce says. Roya, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. Your work is not only transforming the digital landscape, the healthcare system, but also paving the way for a more sustainable future for many more women in AI. We are living here today feeling inspired and ready to make our own positive impact. That's it from episode 171 of the PhD livestream. Thanks to our guest Roya. To stay updated and ensure you never miss a positivity hack delivered, follow Woman on it and turn on notifications. Next week, we're going to talk to Caroline Gerner on overcoming imposter syndrome and setting achievable goals. Thank you so much. As always, our positivity goes quote comes from Positive Thinking Only and goes, look for something positive in each day, even if some days you have to look harder. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude, as Maya Angelou says. Today is your day to hug the future, hug the positivity you want. Thank you.